Hey guys, this is Allie with iMore, and today we're going to look at how to replace the screen on a Verizon or CDMA variant of the iPhone 4. This guide is completely different than the GSM guide. There are internal differences, so if you're looking for an AT&T or GSM iPhone 4 screen fix, take a look at the rest of our guides. We've got that one up as well. For this repair, what you're going to need is a 00 Phillips screwdriver, a pry tool or spudger, a security screwdriver, which is one of the 5-point screwdrivers, as these are all of the Verizon variants will have security screws in your bottom dot connector. That's the only thing you need it for. Flat blade screwdriver, which is just a flat head. You're going to need one that's decently small to get in there. Then you're going to need some type of, I use this, your pry tool might work, but to remove the adhesive from around the edges of the screen, you're going to need something pretty flat. I tend to use these little metal spatulas. They seem to work the best. A razor blade will work just as well. You'll just need to be very careful not to damage cables. You don't need, this is a 000 screwdriver. Some of the screws inside here are pretty tiny. I use these to prevent stripping them, but a 00 screwdriver will work for all the screws, so that's the only thing that's required, but you can use a 000 if you want for some of the tinier screws. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your phone is powered off. Obviously you're going to need a new LCD digitizer assembly as well. I've linked to a place that you can get those within the article, or you're welcome to use any other supplier if you'd like. They also offer all these tools, so you can get those from them as well. So the first thing we're going to want to do is power off our device, and then we're going to want to remove the 2 dot connector screws with our security screwdriver. And always remember to power off the device before you start a repair. Regardless whether it's a battery or a back plate, always turn it off. So after we've got these 2 screws removed, and try to keep the screws in order. A lot of the screws are different inside these phones, so organize them in a way you're going to remember where they go. So next, to remove the back, slide it up, and then it'll pop right off. You set the back aside with the dot connector screws. Now we can see the inside of the phone. The first thing we're going to need to do is remove the battery. So we're going to take our 00 Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to remove the 1 screw holding the battery clip in. Now we're going to remove the battery. We're going to take our pry tool, and there's a little clip right here holding it down. So we're going to take the edge of our pry tool, we're going to get underneath that clip, we're going to flip it up. Just make sure you don't pull too hard, because the little connector on the logic board can come up, and then you're going to have to replace that, and that requires soldering. So just be careful when removing this clip. There is a little pull tab here to pull up the battery. I don't use this. It typically breaks or it bends the battery, and you want to avoid that. So there's really no components along this side of the phone that you can damage. So what I do is I take my pry tool and I just run it underneath the battery right here. Your battery's probably going to be a little bit harder to come up. This battery's been taken out several times, so the adhesive is a little bit weaker. This is just a phone I do demos on, so this battery's been removed tons of times. So once that's out, we're going to set it aside. And again, keep your battery screw with it. Now we're going to take our 00 screwdriver, and there is a little grounding clip right here that covers your antenna. We're going to remove the screw right here that holds that down. Set that screw aside, and this clip is very, very tiny. So gently remove it from the phone. You can see it's a very, very little clip. So set that aside with that screw and don't lose it, because you're going to need to replace it later. Now you can see this tab, I typically fold it over onto the adhesive. Keeps it out of the way when you're working on the phone. Now we're going to move up here to the shield with the dot connector. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the 2 screws holding the shield in place that's covering the dot connector cable. A magnetized screwdriver works a lot better with this, so if you don't have one, you can buy a magnetizer, demagnetizer. They're like maybe $5 from a hardware store. You can also order them online. Makes it a lot easier so you don't lose screws. Then this is just going to pop right up. There's your clip. Set that aside. Now we're going to take our pry tool, we're going to gently pry up the stock connector cable. And once it's up, there is adhesive underneath here, so you're going to need to be careful. Again, this phone's been taken apart, so the adhesive is pretty weak, but you might need to be very careful when pulling it up and breaking the adhesive. So we're just going to fold that over, so then we can get a good view of what's in the phone. Right here is your antenna clip, and we're just going to pry this up off the logic board, and it's wound around two little metal brackets right here. And all we're going to do is back this out of those brackets and set it aside. I'm going to set the phone back down, and then we're going to move up here to the 5 screws that hold down this logic board shield. We're actually going to remove 6 though. We're going to remove this one up here as well, which we'll get to in a second. So we're going to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. Keep them in an order that you're going to remember. I will typically lay them out in the shape that they go back in with the shield next to it, and then lay this screw right here separately. So we're going to pause to remove these 6 screws. Okay, so we removed the 5 screws to this logic board shield, and we've also removed the screw over here on this grounding clip. So to remove this shield right here, there's a little notch right here that holds it in. If you just grab it at the top and gently back it out, you'll be able to pull it up. You can see there's little notches that slide inside the logic board right here, so just be careful that you don't lift it up and break those off. Just back it out gently, and we can set that aside. And there's also a tiny little shield right here that's holding this in. I'm going to try to do this so you can see. Slide your pry tool underneath here, and you're going to need to remove this tiny little shield right here. So that's a little clip that you're going to need to put back in, so don't lose that. Set that aside with the screw that you removed it from. And now we've got a good view of all the little cables that are going to need to be detached from the logic board. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First one, we're going to pop up the camera right here. And just lift that right out. There's a little tab that slides underneath these cables, so just slide it out gently. Set the camera aside. Now we're going to remove this cable, the one right below that, 2, 3, and pay attention to the way these pop up because you don't want to try to pop them up the wrong way and tear a cable. And then we've got our LCD and digitizer cables up here, 4, 5. Cable over here pops down, so just pop that one up, and then our 7th one was the camera that we removed first. So all these cables are out of the way. Now we're going to remove the 5 screws that attach to the logic board. You're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This screw up here in this corner is going to have a tiny gold little grounding shield underneath it. Just make sure that you save that for reassembly. It grounds the camera. So when you pull up this screw, you'll see a tiny little gold grounding screw or grounding shield underneath that you'll need to remove as well. So we'll pause to remove these screws. In the picture, you'll see these are labeled 1, 2, and 3. You'll need to use your flat blade screwdriver, and the other 2 you'll use your standard 00 Phillips screwdriver. Okay, so we removed the 5 screws holding the logic board in place. Now you can see the logic board is starting to come up, and we're ready to remove that. The first thing you want to do is grab the bottom part down here, gently push those cables out of the way, and you can remove the logic board from the phone. One thing I want to point out is there is a tiny little rubber piece that sits at the top of the logic board. This grounds one of your antennas. Don't lose this. It's going to need to be in place when you reinsert the logic board, or you might have reception or Wi-Fi issues. So just make sure when you remove the logic board that you take that little rubber piece with it. Sometimes it'll fall off and you'll see it sitting right in here on the LCD digitizer cable. Just don't lose that. The next thing we're going to do is remove the vibrator assembly. I've always found it easier. You can use your pry tool, or you can use a little metal spatula like this. It's just held down with adhesive. So what I typically will do is I will gently put the metal spatula or pry tool underneath it and just gently pry upwards, and you'll be able to remove it out of the device like so. As you can see, there's just adhesive on the back. Normally this adhesive is reusable, it'll stick just fine. After you have that out, you can set it aside. Now what we're going to look at doing is removing the speaker assembly down here. Your cellular antenna is attached to it, that'll come out right with it. You only have 2 screws holding this in on the left and the right. The left screw right here will have a little black triangular spacer. As you can see, this phone does not. This is just a test phone I use, so that spacer's missing. But just make sure when you remove this screw that you bring that spacer with and reinsert it when reassembling. So we're going to remove the 2 screws that are holding this in place. One. And there's 2. And again, this is the one that's going to have the spacer on your phone. It's just missing in this test phone. Now we're going to remove the speaker assembly. It'll just pop up very easily. Set it aside. Now we've pretty much got all the guts out of the phone, and we're going to work on removing the screen. The first thing we're going to do is take our 00 Phillips screwdriver. You're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that are in each corner of the device. You want to remove those completely from the device. So we're going to pause and remove the 4 corner screws with your 00 Phillips screwdriver. Okay, so we've removed all 4 corner screws. They are all 4 the same size, so you can group those together. Now we're going to loosen the 6 screws that run along each side of the mid-frame. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Typically about 2.5 turns is enough for these. You can remove them all the way. I've never found it necessary, and the washers are kind of a little difficult to get back in. So I typically do not remove these screws all the way. If you unscrew it too far, it might fall out when you're placing the screen in. That's okay, just don't lose any of the washers or the screws. But if you just loosen them, you'll be able to get the front assembly out without actually having to remove them. Anyone that's taken these apart and completely removed these, they're more than a pain to get back in. So we're just going to loosen those, and then we're going to flip the phone over, and we're ready to move the assembly. As you can see, this one's not broken. We're just using it for demo purposes. But if your phone is broken, you might have some shards of glass come off while you're removing this. That's okay. Just be careful. You might want to wear gloves so you don't cut yourself. The first thing you're going to do is start in this upper left-hand corner, and you're going to need to break some adhesive that's in here. This phone is going to come apart a lot easier because it's been taken apart, but just slowly work and pry, and it's going to break off from that top part, and then you're going to come back around the bottom, and you're going to do the exact same thing, being careful around the home button, especially to the left of it because that's where the cable is. And then once the adhesive is broken, you're going to be able to completely separate this, and we're going to back out these cables gently. So you don't want them to get caught up on anything. We're going to back them right through there. And now we've separated our LCD digitizer assembly from the mid-frame. So now you're going to be to the point where you're going to put back together your phone. So to do that, the first thing we're going to note is a lot of these assemblies will not come with speaker mesh or the camera hold on the back, which is a little plastic circular piece. So off of your old assembly, if the new one does not have these pre-installed, you'll need to remove the speaker mesh. The easiest way to do that off of your old one is just use your pry tool and push it through, peel it off the back. It's just held with adhesive. And then the easiest way I've found is not to put it on the new assembly. You can line it up perfectly. If you put it right here on the mid frame, use a little adhesive if you need to. 3M double-sided adhesive right on the right-hand corner normally works pretty well. The camera hold, just use your pry tool to pull it off without breaking it off the old assembly, and just place it right here. There's a little groove to where you can line it up perfectly. Once that's done, we're ready to reassemble with the new digitizer LCD assembly.